Hey YouTube. Sorry for the recent dearth of content. I've had a few semi-tumultuous changes in my life. 3 days before Christmas, I lost my job. I was unemployed for the rest of the year. That was a rough week. Now I have a new job, but the schedule is a lot crazier, and it leaves me with less free time. This has urged me to spend more of the free time I have concentrating on academic hurdles in the hope of getting over them, so I can go back to pursuing an education in the hope of improving these particular prospects. Now that that's said, I've got some griping to do. Let's have a look at George Washington. This was a man who played politics with his words. When addressing crowds of Catholics, he talked about Jesus Christ. When addressing Jews, he talked about the Messiah. When addressing crowds of Cherokees, he talked about the Great Spirit. When addressing religiously spiritually mixed crowds, he talked about divine providence and fate. Bear these words in mind. They will become relevant shortly. Washington was, for a time, a regular churchgoer. But one day he was intercepted on his way out of the church by one of the clergy and admonished for his tendency to leave before the sacrament was given. He apologized, conceded the point, and subsequently stopped attending. He continued after that going to church, but only to escort his wife. He would then wait outside for services to conclude and then would escort her home. He remained Christian, but privately Christian. He had his beliefs, but they were between him and Christ. He did his praying on his feet. Widely circulated is the notion that Washington died of bloodletting. This is an understandable misconception, but a misconception nonetheless. You see, he was bled in his last hours, and this surely didn't help matters, but it was not the cause of his death. He died from a goiter, so bad that it slowly closed his windpipe and suffocated him. Now, personally, if I absolutely had to choose, I would prefer Kennedy's death. But that aside, the whole ordeal took hours, and what is especially interesting is how he spent those hours. At no point did he actually send for any clergy to perform last rites. He was content to spend what he must have known would be his last hours in the company of friends and family. Now have a look at some of his sentiments. Religious controversies are always productive of more acrimony and irreconcilable hatreds than those which spring from any other cause. Of all the animosities which have existed among mankind, those which are caused by difference of sentiment in religion appear to be the most inveterate and distressing, and ought most to be deprecated. I was in hopes that the enlightened and liberal policy which has marked the present age would at least have reconciled Christians of every denomination so far that we should never again see the religious disputes carried to such a pitch as to endanger the peace of society. Details along these lines were glossed over a bit in my upbringing. These among many. Now let's have a look at the beginning of the Marine hymn. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. The shores of Tripoli. Has anyone ever have any of you watching this ever given that any examination? Ever wondered why that's there, what it refers to? It's a historical reference to Tripoli, along the northern shore of Africa, in a region today known as Libya, but which at the time was called the Barbary States. This is a reference to a war that happened during the Adams administration. John Adams, the shortest and possibly loudest of the Founding Fathers, who spearheaded the argument in favor of independence, who was our first ambassador to Great Britain, our first vice president, and our second president. During his presidency, the United States was conducting trade with Europe, so we had several shipping lanes reaching across the Atlantic. The ships making this journey, carrying these goods, had been falling victim to networks of pirates operating out of Tripoli. So to put a stop to this, we went to war with the Barbary States in an effort to crack down on these pirates. At the end of that war, we signed the Treaty of Tripoli. This treaty was read aloud in its entirety on the floor of the Senate on June 7, 1797, where it was unanimously approved, then presented proudly to the nation by President Adams. Take a moment, if you will, to consider Article 11 of this treaty. As the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Mussulmen, that means Muslims, and as the said states never entered into any war or act of hostility against any Mohammedan, that means Muslim, nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries. As the government of the United States is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion. This is a treaty we signed during the Adams administration. John Adams. This is a proclamation we made with one voice. Now examine some of this fellow's sentiments. The frightful engines of ecclesiastical councils, of diabolical malice and Calvinistical good nature, never failed to terrify me exceedingly whenever I thought of preaching. The question before the human race is, whether the God of nature shall govern the world by his own laws, or whether priests and kings shall rule it by fictitious miracles. Let the human mind loose. It must be loose. It will be loose. Superstition and dogmatism cannot confine it. As I understand the Christian religion, it was, and is, a revelation. But how has it happened that millions of fables, tales, legends have been blended with both Jewish and Christian revelation that have made them the most bloody religion that ever existed? Can a free government possibly exist with the Roman Catholic religion? Such details as these were likewise conveniently omitted. Now, what about Thomas Jefferson? The man who wrote the Declaration of Independence once said, "The day will come when the mystical generation of Jesus, by the Supreme Being as his Father in the womb of a virgin, will be classed with the fable of the generation of Minerva in the brain of Jupiter." The author of the Virginia State Constitution, containing the Virginia Act for Religious Freedom, the first act on the continent to separate church and state, once said, "In every country and in every age, the priest has been hostile to liberty. He is always in alliance with the despot, abetting his abuses in return for protection to his own." Our first ambassador to France once said, "The clergy had a very favorite hope of obtaining an establishment of a particular form of Christianity throughout the United States, and as every sect believed its own form the true one, everyone perhaps hoped for his own, but especially the Episcopalians and Congregationalists. The returning good sense of our country threatens abortion to their hopes, and they believe that any portion of power confided to me will be exerted in opposition to their schemes. And they believe rightly, for I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." Our first Secretary of State wrote, "It does me no injury for my neighbor to say there are 20 gods or no God. It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg." The chief architect of U.S. democracy once took a proverbial machete to the Bible, removing all but 42 pages, and when he was done, he held up what remained for all to see and declared, "These are the parts I believe." Then he ran for president and won.